Great Lakes exist in a specific region of planet Earth. They contain a large amount of water and host a number of diverse plants and animals. Their shoreline is extensive, and it's made up of terrain that was shaped by the very powers of Earth itself. There may be other lakes on Earth, but only the Great Lakes are known as the Great Lakes. Blatantly obvious and quite vague statements like these are how some Midwest high school students manage to skate by with a D+ in geology class without once ever opening the textbook. The ability to divulge a plethora of information out of thin air without managing to say a single thing of value is indeed a skill, one sometimes used by completely ordinary people to make you and me think they have extraordinary abilities. They use this trick to pique our interests, while they look into a crystal ball and help us empty out our wallets. The art of deliberately phony fortune-telling is as old as the art of fortune-telling, and it can be difficult to identify the charlatans because they're good, sometimes so good that they don't even realize their own abilities. Hello, and welcome, my freshwater friends, to episode 25 of the About the Water podcast, an exploration of high strangeness on and around the Great Lakes. Today, we're heading to that world-famous piece of Lake Michigan shoreline, Chicago, Illinois. Here, we'll be taken on a mystery tour of the unknown by a guide who's never been there, as the sound of crashing thunder tears our sense of reality wide open, echoing down Addison Avenue and outward about the water. Episode 25, Orbuculum Veritas. "Oh, do come in, darling, do come in," Miss Cindy advised, from behind a black curtain near the back of her shop. "Have a seat at the table, darling. I'll be right with you. Miss..." The young girl sat down as instructed, and in between sobs replied, Thank you. June. My name is June." "Welcome, June. Be at ease here. It's a protected space," Miss Cindy said, as she unhurriedly grabbed her cup of Darjeeling and took her seat in front of the row of security camera monitors. "Oh, this should be a piece of cake," Miss Cindy thought to herself, as she observed the young girl's behaviors. All right, young. Geez, she is young. I bet 20, if that. Okay, Prada purse, whoa. And what is that? Oh, Saint Laurent coat that you're tossing on a chair like it's nothing. Who are you, honey? Miss Cindy sat silently and out of sight as she watched the girl on the monitor, taking in every detail. Okay, checking your phone every 10 seconds. High-end outfit, looks like it's been slept in. But not at a boy's house because your makeup is fresh. It looks deliberate. Miss Cindy snapped her fingers and smiled to herself in a small mirror on her cluttered desk. She had the girl pegged already. Question is, sweetie, what did you do to piss Daddy off? Miss Cindy then dimmed the shop lights and gracefully revealed her presence from behind the black curtain. My child, don't cry. All is forgivable," she said dramatically, as she handed young June a box of Kleenex. June was astonished. "Forgivable? How did you know that's why I'm..." Miss Cindy cut her off. "I had a dream, June. I had a dream I would meet a powerful young girl, and she would need my help. As soon as you walked in, I could feel it was you." Miss Cindy sat down at the reading table and leaned back in her chair. "Oh, but I am sorry. My remote card reader's acting up. I hope cash will be okay?" June reached into her $3,000 clutch purse eagerly. Of course," she said excitedly. "Yes, of course. I have plenty of money." Miss Cindy did her best to hide her smile. "Well then, darling," she replied happily, while dramatically yanking a thrift store polyester sheet off her crystal-clear Amazon scrying ball. "Let us see what I can see." 30 minutes, one correct assumption, and $240 in cash later, Miss Cindy thumbed through her newly acquired stack of money as June walked out the door, confident in her decision to advise the young girl that her father would be delighted to hear an apology for, whatever it was. Glancing at her watch, Miss Cindy saw that it was only 30 minutes until closing time. Taking a look up at the shoebox-sized windows of her small basement shop, she could see the unmistakable, Birkenstock-clad foot traffic of a sea of Chicago Cubs fans. "Oh yeah, she said out loud, suddenly remembering that there was a home game at nearby Wrigley Field, and that her commute would now easily take 3 times as long. The beautiful golden orange of the setting sun bounced off Lake Michigan and painted Addison Avenue, casting a light that made the tacky decor within the shop look halfway legitimate. As she scanned the room with a self-approving smile, Miss Cindy suddenly jumped back with a loud gasp, noticing the shadowy figure now sitting at her reading table. The figure immediately turned around to face her. He had wide eyes. The outside fiery light was burning in them as he spoke. "Miss, please, miss, help me." Miss Cindy slowly walked around the table, frightened, with her back pressed up against the wall. I didn't even hear you. How long have you been sitting here? How did you get in here?" The man ignored the questions. His gaze was fixed on her. He was a short, middle-aged man with a poorly kept white beard and hair which looked like it was almost dyed gray. He sat hunched over the table nervously, obviously in some kind of distress. "He told me to come here and wait until the girl left to give you the message." Miss Cindy stepped towards the table, putting a hand on the man's back and trying to comfort him against her better judgment. Who told you to come here? What message?" she asked gently. His hands were trembling, and just before he erupted into hysterical tears, he simply offered the words, "I don't know." While Miss Cindy may not have been a legitimate mystic, she did know that a little hot tea and some lemongrass incense was good for the soul. Within about 10 minutes, she had calmed the man down enough for him to be coherent, as he explained why he was there. His name was Rye Keston, a Manchester, England-born resident of Milwaukee, Wisconsin. On and off, for the last several months, he had been experiencing severe nightmares, from which he would wake up screaming and sweating. In those nightmares, an unseen presence would tell him to go to Chicago, take the L train to the Addison stop. He had done so accordingly, several times already. The dreams told me I would know why I was there when I got there, but I've never figured it out. I've been here so many times, I don't know, I just wander. I saw your sign and I thought, maybe you could help." Miss Cindy, weighed down by the man's sincere distress, took a deep breath, about to advise him that she, unfortunately, wasn't actually what she claimed to be. The man scooted back in his chair to leave. "Look, I'm sorry, I know this is crazy. I'm probably not even welcome here. I'm not welcome here. I'm not welcome anywhere." Miss Cindy kindly motioned for him to remain seated. Of course, you're welcome here. You're welcome here." The cold surge shot through Cindy, knocking the wind out of her. The man's eyes narrowed as a malevolently victorious grin crept across his face. The light in the room seemed to fade, as if it was being drawn into him as he inhaled. And then, speaking in a voice which was no longer his own, he said,
"Wow, Miss Cindy. You really don't understand how any of this works, do you?"
Reaching across the table, the man extended his arms and grabbed Cindy's hands firmly, knocking over the teacups in the process. His hands were ice cold. His eyes were now pitch black. The man laughed, looking directly at Cindy as she struggled to pull away.
Let me show you, Miss Cindy. Let me show you exactly how this works.
Miss Cindy fell out of her chair and onto her hands and knees. Over her own heavy breathing, she could begin to hear the sounds of waves and birds. Opening her eyes, she was greeted by golden, bright, mid-afternoon sunshine. She felt warm sand around her fingers, and as her eyes began to adjust, she could see that it was all gone. The shop, Rye Keston, the city, it was all gone. She was now completely alone on a completely unrecognizable beach. She took to her feet and found herself face to face with a young girl who had appeared out of nowhere. The maybe 4 or 5-year-old girl wore a blank expression, staring directly through Cindy at something else. Cindy turned around to see what it was. Positioned on the sand, with the synthetically glowing blue water stretching to the horizon as a backdrop, were 2 doors. Both were identical, deep brown wood, ornate brass doorknobs. The only difference was the single word that was written on each of them in a crude stencil with white paint. The door to the left reading love, and the door to the right reading fear. Turning around, Cindy then made eye contact with the girl who was now looking up at her. The girl began to sob as she told Cindy, "I can't read." With a loud crack of thunder, the beach went pitch black. Miss Cindy could see a faint object in the distance, something glowing. It was her crystal ball. She was looking directly into it, still sitting at her shop's reading table, Rye's icy grip still holding on to her by both arms.
Her father's a bad, bad man, Miss Cindy, and you sent her right back to him,
Rye said. Cindy gazed into the ball, watching as the girl began to walk through the door labeled love. "Yes," Miss Cindy said. "Go on, sweetie, go on." From various corners of the shop, Miss Cindy could hear objects sliding off shelves and tables and crashing onto the floor. A strong wind had begun to blow through the shop. Sounds of thunder were echoing off the walls. Cindy could begin to feel rain. She had never once looked up from the ball. "It's okay, sweetie, go ahead, go through," she urged. Wright tightened his grasp, causing Cindy to wince in pain.
She knew what to do,
he said angrily. As Cindy's eyes remained fixed on the ball, she watched as a dark figure crept up behind the girl. "Who is that?" Cindy demanded. "Who is that?" Receiving no answer from Rye. The figure gently put one hand on the girl's shoulder, and with the other, it pulled her hand away from the left doorknob and moved it to the right, the knob belonging to the fear door.
"Her father is a bad, bad man, and you sent her right back to him,"
Rye advised. Cindy pleaded. "Stop, sweetie, please, no." She looked up at Rye. "You let go of me." As Miss Cindy finally pulled herself free of Rye's grasp, she knocked the crystal ball off the table, and it cracked in half on the floor. She stood up, now ankle deep in water. I can still catch her, she told Rye. As Miss Cindy began to slosh her way to the door, Rye reached up and grabbed her arm again, throwing her to the floor. With a deep gasp, Miss Cindy closed her eyes. "Yes, I do. I really do," a beautiful, kind, and soft voice proclaimed from across the table. Miss Cindy opened her eyes to find herself still sitting at the reading table, with June sitting across from her. "Yes," June insisted. You asked me if I love him. Yes, I love him. He's the one." Miss Cindy looked around the shop. Everything was completely dry, and everything was in order. Even her cheap scrying ball was still there, in the middle of the table, entirely undamaged. She lunged across the table, grabbing June by the arms. Miss Cindy squeezed firmly as she stared directly into her eyes. "Choose love," Cindy ordered. "Choose love, always. But you're going to have to run. Your father is a bad, bad man, and you cannot go back to him." The girl's eyes widened in shock. Her tone became grave. "How do you know my father?" she insisted. Cindy relaxed her grip. She reached inside her black Halloween store mystic's gown and removed the money that she had collected from June not moments ago, handing it back to her. Glancing up at the street-level windows, she saw that it was still broad daylight out. June asked again, "How do you know who my father is?" And for the first time, as a legitimate fortune teller, and her last time as any kind of fortune teller, Cindy finally told the truth. I don't know who your father is." In the preceding reenactment you just heard, all names have been changed to protect the innocent. I've always wanted to say that. Actually, the only pseudonym in this story is June's name. She insisted to Miss Cindy that her name be changed in the event that this story was ever retold. She told Miss Cindy that she and her true love would be fleeing the country, and aside from a first name, Miss Cindy knows absolutely nothing about her. She has absolutely no idea who her father is, and has not heard from her since. Miss Cindy did quit her practice that day, completely unnerved by the experience, and more than content to be one of the many Cindys in Chicago who is not a fortune teller. When I asked her if we should use a pseudonym for her, she said no, and likewise when I asked if we should use a pseudonym for her mysterious guest, Rye Keston, Cindy emphatically insisted no. Use his real name. Although she's unable to explain who he was, how he got in the shop, or where he went, she's determined to make sense of it eventually. So, in hopes that you and I can see something in our own crystal balls, let's focus our attention there for starters. My initial hope was that Miss Cindy had kept the surveillance tapes from that day, so that we could perhaps see exactly how Rye got in and out. I also wanted to see if my hunch was correct, that Rye Keston wasn't exactly a person, so to speak, but rather an entity. Miss Cindy buried her face in her hands as she explained to me that her monitors were not equipped with recorders. They were a tool that she used specifically for recon to assess her clients as they came in. Basing our research off Miss Cindy's belief that Rye was indeed an actual person, my next move is probably not a surprising one to you. I combed every database that I could find that offered public access in Milwaukee, which was Rye's claimed place of origin, and I found nothing. I expanded the search to North America and received the same results. Even if I flipped the names around and searched Keston Rye, nothing. Miss Cindy and myself briefly discussed the possibility of Rye being short for Ryan. Ryan Keston. If that's the case, then based on my findings, this mystery does have a very clear and concise answer. Ryan Keston is a PGA golf pro from Vermont who looks nothing like our suspect and travels to Chicago to use his paranormal abilities to mess with phony fortune tellers during his free time. Obviously, one would assume this lead is a ringer, but that physical appearance mismatch is, unfortunately, a no-go. One of my favorite pieces of high strangeness advice that I've ever received was from a paranormal investigator that I met in northern Michigan. He told me, a name isn't always a name. More often than not, it's a message. And in that spirit, the name Rye Keston becomes far from an irrelevant detail. Rye, the grain, is sometimes used as a symbol of resilience, a crop that will grow in poor soil and harsh conditions where others fail. And rye, in its English origins, can refer to a well-watered place. When we combine June's inevitable rejection of her harsh family environment, as well as the imagery of doors on a beach, a well-watered place, these become difficult to write off. Looking at the name Keston, it's strongly associated with a chestnut. In fact, in Croatian, Keston, K-E-S-T-E-N, directly translates to chestnut. At first I felt kind of silly digging into the spiritual meaning behind a chestnut, but when I did, a door to an entire world opened up. In the world of high strangeness, chestnuts can be placed in doorways to ward off evil spirits. Chestnuts are often used as a fertility symbol, symbolizing a new beginning, maybe a new love. And chestnuts strongly symbolize a connection to Earth as a bridge between the physical world and the spiritual world. That is exactly what happened to Miss Cindy. She fully admits to never having had any kind of an inkling of precognition, retrocognition, or clairvoyance. And yet, in this one instance, she did. Ry Keston, whoever or whatever he was, bridged that gap. I personally remain completely convinced that Ry was not a person. The one detail of Cindy's story that I cannot let go of was Ry deliberately saying that he didn't feel welcome here. He mentioned it several times, almost seeming to trick Cindy into saying, verbatim, "You are welcome here." The concept that paranormal entities must be welcomed into your home or place of business is far from an unpopular one. In fact, one of my favorite myths from being a kid was that a vampire would trick you by saying "thank you" while he stood at your doorstep, in hopes that you would reply, "You're welcome." Cindy, however, has a very different perception, and it's one that we obviously must respect because she was there. In her own words, Ry was real. He was sitting right there. The water at the beach seemed obviously fake. The doors looked fake too, very out of place. Even the rain in the shop and the thunder, I could sense it, I could feel it, but it was fake. I somehow knew it. But Ry, I'm telling you, Ry was right there. He was right there. I reached out to some practicing medium friends of mine and described Miss Cindy's experience, asking if they've ever had something similar happen to them. The answers were fairly consistent and best summarized as, quote, "No, I didn't, but I would love to." That makes one of us. The standard experience, it seems, in most scrying and soothsaying tends to be a bit more subtle. The medium will often experience feelings, see images of names, people, places. These images and these feelings are often brief and kind of dim. I've had it best described to me, I think, as imagine reading a compass needle instead of being catapulted directly to the North Pole. Miss Cindy's experience was truly unique. Being transported, having a full body, mind, and spiritual experience on a different, what seems to be, plane of existence. Cindy and myself both find this falling under the category of a bit too much. Nonetheless, it's an experience that many practitioners are left champing at the bit for. Cindy did close up shop immediately after her experience, and she said that her experience made her realize two things. Number one, she wants nothing more to do with the strange world that she finally got a taste of. And number two, that she genuinely wants to help people. She's currently studying to become a licensed therapist, with plans of opening her own practice in time. And as to whether or not the future does have this in store for her as planned, Cindy is pretty adamant that she'll leave the soothsaying up to you and me. And with that, thank you, sincerely, for listening. Here's hoping that whatever the future holds in store for you, that it be as grand, beautiful, and enduring as our Great Lakes. I'll see you about the water.